Welcome to We Build Great Apartment Communities, the only show dedicated to the process and strategies for transforming apartment buildings to thriving communities. I am your host, John Brackett, and welcome to the show. All right, folks, welcome to We Build Great Apartment Communities, the only place where we talk about taking apartment buildings and turning them into amazing communities. I am your host, John Brackett. I have here a special guest. His name is Bob Lachance, someone who I know you're going to find very interesting. This is going to be a great conversation. So I'm going to introduce Bob to everybody. So Bob, first of all, welcome to the show, man. Very excited for you to be here.
All right. Well, John, thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
You're very welcome, buddy. So let me invite our audience into this conversation and share with them who you are, your background, and of course where you're going. And then we're gonna get into this. This is going to be another great one. So Bob Lachance is the founder and CEO of Premier Virtual Assistant Staffing Company, Riva Global. He played professional hockey for 8 years, 4 with the St. Louis Blues here in the United States, and 4 years overseas in Europe. So after his pro hockey career ended, he dove deep into real estate and acquired his first lift in 2004. And he's gone on to over 800 transactions since then and started multiple businesses, as well as helping to start one of the country's largest real estate education platforms. So, Bob, welcome to the show, buddy. This is going to be another good one.
Yeah, let's get rocking and rolling.
Okay, let's do it, man. So my first question to you is, tell us a little bit about your transition into real estate, right? Share your story.
Yep. Yeah, I'll do a quick rundown of it. When did I retired? I think I was 20, in my late 20s. Like I said, I played hockey for 8 years, 4 years here in the U.S., 4 years in Europe. And towards the end of my career, my wife and I just had my first kid, and we had a decision to make. And I'm sure a lot of individuals could relate to this, the decision from jumping from one industry to the next, right? It's never easy when you make any type of decision like that. So my first tough decision as a young adult, I should call myself at that time, right, was, do I pull my wife and son from here in the United States and bring them over to Europe? And then, try to play that game forever, play into your 40s if you want. But, every year you're looking for another contract. In the sports world, you're hustling for the next year. You're playing this year for the year after. So it's a pretty interesting game behind the scenes that a lot of people don't see, right? So I decided to hang up my skates and jump into real estate. I figured, I went to school at Boston University for 4 years, but I left early. Here's really the dichotomy of this. I left 2 classes early, so I did not get my degree. So I either had to find an industry where I had 0 barrier of entry or go back to school and finish my schooling. So I figured, I didn't really like going to school back in the day, so I might as well jump into an industry where I could start making money right away. So I picked real estate, read a bunch of books, Rich Dad Poor Dad, et cetera, et cetera. And so I hit the ground running. I always had that, little the little guy in the back of your head saying, you got to make money today to support your family. You got to make money. So I took action right away. I hustled. Ended up doing a rehab my first 2 months into retirement. Made about $32,000. Fantastic. All was good. But it took me 2 months from the start to finish to get that check. And I looked in the mirror and I said, I have 0 systems. I didn't know anything about real estate. I got lucky. I drove by a property, made an offer. They accepted it. Rest is history. Then I figured I had to take a step back and really learn the business and learn really what real estate investing was. So the best thing I ever did is I went to a real estate investment association. I asked everyone in that investor association who the top investor was, and they pointed at a gentleman named Patrick Precourt. I went up to him. I said, you have no idea who I am, but I'm willing to do absolutely anything in your business to help out. I'm not looking for a paycheck. I will earn my way in. So he said, actually, I'm looking for a door knocker. I said, all right, it's back in 2004. Now, if anyone listens to this door knock, it absolutely stinks, door knocking. However, one of the best things I ever did. Because you're walking up the doors, you're knocking on doors, nobody knows who you are. It's just really good training, right? So ended up going through that, did that for a year straight, every single day from Monday through Friday, from 10 a.m. to 3 p.m. every single day. I would knock. And then that was time for me to graduate. And we were doing a lot of short sale transactions. So I pulled myself out of being a door knocker. I brought someone on in my position, and I started negotiating with banks. So we've done 6, 7, 800 plus transactions on the short sale side, in rehabs and wholesaling and things like that. And then 2007, we were flipping properties with a couple of our buddies, Than, Merrill, Paul, Lesage, Conrad, here in Connecticut. This is Fortune Builders. They own Fortune Builders now. And they asked Pat, my business partner, and I to join forces with them to create this company where we would handle the back-end coaching and working with students and building that side of it up, which was a fantastic opportunity. So we jumped at that while we were negotiating short sales and flipping properties, all that kind of good stuff. And then that morphed into an opportunity that I saw working with coaching students. A lot of coaching students, maybe a lot of your listeners here, either work part-time or full-time and are looking at real estate as a side hustle. And I wanted to figure out a service out there, some way to actually help them do the side hustle while they could still keep their job. 2013, I know I'm fast forwarding, but 2013, I actually got introduced to what virtual assistants were. True transparency, I never even knew what a virtual assistant was, but that was very common in the real estate agent world. So I put my business hat on in 2014. I figured out how to start a company out of the Philippines, and then I created a product with my training background in a service of virtual assistants, training our virtual assistants on working with real estate investors. So fast forward, here we are today. Long and short, I know I went like a fire hydrant there, so I apologize.
That's okay, man. That's okay. That's what this is about. So I appreciate you sharing. So, okay, a couple of different questions. Okay, let me unpack some of this stuff for our audience. So the first thing that I heard you say was door knocking, and the fact that it was difficult, but it was one of the best things that you ever did. So elaborate on that a little bit. Why was I understand the difficulty there, probably a little bit uncomfortable, right? But talk a little bit about why you feel that was the best thing you ever did, and the greatest lesson learned from that, and how are you applying that to what you do today?
Yeah, because in real estate, you get a lot of rejection. And the sooner that we all understand and accept that you will get more no's than yeses, the way better off we all are as real estate investors. Because you're going to make a ton of offers before you get one accepted. So there's going to be a lot of no's there, and that's okay. There's, in my opinion, you learn a lot from a no. For those of you who only get yeses, you don't learn much.
So what did you learn from your no's?
You know what? I learned how to not change my words, right? And, sales is a lot of your communication, a lot of language that you use. So you have to change every interaction. Whenever you get a no, you have to sit back and really analyze, what could I have done better? Okay.
So I what's really interesting, right? So one of the very first jobs that I started out of college was I did two things. One was an analyst, doing analysis for, I think it was Fortune 50 companies, okay? And that was kind of interesting. I like that because I like the analytical aspect of it, but I saw myself, I go, man, there's no way I could sit behind here all day and do this. And I was doing this on the back end for a lot of the advisors up front, and so I would do all this analysis work, right? I'd give it to my boss. My boss would look at it and he goes, man, this is either not too good or really good. And then they would use that to have conversations with their clients, right? Or add that to their commentary. Anyways, the second was me calling on, leads. And so I agree, man, that was really valuable. One of my biggest takeaways there, fast forward maybe a year later, was that one of the greatest advantages from that lesson was it made me realize, he or she who can control their destiny would typically do that through advertising and marketing, right? So it became really clear to me that if I can pick up the phone and create my opportunity, I'd never have to worry about work again. So that was the biggest lesson there, and I carried that forward. Sounds like you did something very similar, right? So you took those experiences and now you're doing that in this position now today, or was it the position prior?
So everything that I started back then is a foundation of what I'm doing today, right?
Gotcha.
It's all of those no's. Let's use door knocking as an example. All those no's will allow you to now test different things that you're doing. And if you get a no, it doesn't matter. You keep going forward. You don't quit.
Okay, awesome, man. Okay, I completely get that. And I know that's going to resonate with our audience, right? Okay, so now we're going to pivot a little bit. So one of the things that we do on this show, in this podcast, is we talk about the cycle of real estate, right? Whether it be a single-family residential property, in this case, our focus is multifamily. We're gonna expand upon that a little bit, right? Because your experiences are broad. Whether it be office, retail, industrial, doesn't matter. The cycle is relatively the same, right? We have an acquisition component, then we have to capitalize the asset somehow. We have to finance it, whether it be debt and equity, combination thereof. At some point, we have to manage it to execute on the plan, and then we dispose of the asset at some point in time. Ideally, we hit our projections, and we profit from that opportunity and make our distributions as planned, right? So let's talk a little bit about your experiences acquiring real estate. Okay, you've been in 800 transactions. Talk a little bit about, maybe some of the greatest lessons learned from you in the acquisition process that you can share with our audience that would add, some value to them.
Yeah, so acquisition is pretty interesting. I mean, you nailed it at the beginning. No matter if you're in, residential, you're in commercial, it doesn't matter what it is. It all starts with marketing, right? You need to get those leads in. You need to find those properties. You need to, right? So that marketing component, whatever you're doing, is extremely important in any type of industry. And then when it goes from marketing, then it goes to acquisition. So acquisition, you have to talk to individuals. And every time you're thinking about acquisition, for me personally, if it's going to be a buy and hold, you're thinking in your mind numbers. Like you're an analyst, right, John? So you analyze all of those properties while you're negotiating and talking to a potential seller. You also have to think in your other side of your brain, you have to think numbers. What's my exit strategy? Is it going to get that property under contract and assign that contract, or is it a long-term buy and hold? And you're also thinking, all right, do I have another developer that I could bring into this deal? Right. So there's a lot of things that are going through your mind while you're analyzing these deals. So I think, one of the takeaways that I just want to give everyone is, you have to really be thinking with a couple different hats on when you're acquiring properties, right? You think when you have the lead that comes in, automatically you have to think exit, right? Who are going to be either, if you're going to be, doing a syndication, you're going to be, raising money from this individual to be able to close on this particular purchase. Those are the things you have to be thinking about on the front end. Does that make sense, or did I go?
No, it does. It does. Right. So let me maybe break that down so that our audience can understand that a little better, right? So I get the fact that when you're acquiring an asset, you have to think about that purchase through a couple of different lenses. Okay, you brought up exit, which I think is great, but you also have to think about that through the lens of profitability, right? Because a project that's not profitable, or you can't present it as such, very difficult to raise money to a project that is not very profitable, right? So when you're going through acquisition mode, right, and you're going through your analysis process, what are some of the key things that you look for to signal, hey, this is a great deal?
Yeah, I always look to see if my numbers work. Well, so meaning numbers work. If I'm going to keep it as a long-term buy and hold, what's your cap rate? All those things, but you have to look at the condition of the property too. So every time we're looking to analyze properties, first thing we look at is, all right, we run them through on the analysis side and in the conversation side. We want to know what needs to be done with that property, right? Because there's always fix-up costs and a lot of different types of projects that you'll get access to.
Sure.
The individual, the seller you're talking to is never going to tell you the truth. So you always have to do your due diligence. I mean, I can't say never.
Why do you say that? Why do you say never going to tell you the truth?
Because I have not met one seller that told me the truth yet. In all conditions of the property or numbers or rental income, and no matter what it is, there's always it's only 5% vacancy. Well, really, it was really 10% vacancy when you owned it for 20 years. There's a lot of different things that they just don't tell you that you have to unpack.
Interesting. So, okay. All right. So you notice when you said never, man, my eyes, you kind of shocked me a little bit, right? Not bad. It's not bad. It just is. But I'm going to challenge that perspective, and then we're going to move through that. Okay.
Perfect.
And so here's something that I've learned over the years, man. And I think the natural tendency is for people to approach a seller with that mindset, right? Like you're anticipating them to essentially lie to you or not tell the truth. I've learned to change that because I've learned that my best deals have always come from doing business directly with sellers. Okay, my best deals. All of them, every single one. In fact, I think probably almost every single deal that we have in our portfolio today, maybe 70% of them that we've kept over the years and that we still have been me putting deals together directly with principals. Now, here's the thing. These are not your average principals, right? I mean, they're pretty sophisticated people. Mm-hmm. So my experience has been very different, right? It's usually there is an openness to talking about the opportunities with the property and also the challenges. But I've learned, man, over the years that if I approach someone with an attitude of what are you trying to hide from me versus, hey, let's talk candidly about what the opportunities and issues are with the property, just easier to do the deal, right? Psychologically, it does something where you're either in a reactive mode or a proactive mode to solving problems. The best deal makers in the world are folks that are really good at solving problems, right? And so I would rather approach people openly. And even if they friggin' leave some facts out, I'm still going to find, I always uncover what the issues are, right? I always uncover them. And usually when they leave that information out on the front end, it makes it easier to put together the deal on the back end because those are things that just should have been brought up, right? But anyways, okay, so I'm going to get back to that conversation. I just thought it was very interesting.
Let me add to that because I'm laughing. I'm from the Northeast, so no matter what, it doesn't matter. Somebody's going to tell you something. You have to. Like my mindset is, I'm assuming that they're not going to tell me the truth, right? Because
trust
dealing with this problem. Trust but verify. So I was laughing when you were saying that, right? I go into everything. My mindset is always positive. My buddies call me Sunny 72. So I always look at stuff in a positive light, but do understand that, most likely there's going to be some stuff that you have to uncover yourself. So that's why
I totally agree. And here's the thing, and it's not really, now obviously, I'm a pretty positive person, right? But I'm not naive. And what I mean by that is I don't go into a deal being naive about the fact that there are just going to be some issues that I'm going to have to deal with, okay? That's not what I'm saying. What I am saying is when I go into a deal, I'm looking for problems to solve, and I get happy when I find problems to solve.
That's where you make the most money, all right? You are right.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so let's shift through that, okay? So I appreciate you talking a little bit about that experience with the door knocking and how that transitioned into your ability to create opportunity today. We talked a little bit about the acquisition side of the business, what that looks like, why that's important, why it's relevant. Okay, now we're going to pivot into financing, okay? Debt and equity, blend thereof, right, no matter what that looks like. Yep. We're going to talk about financing at this point, really, really critical. So my earlier comment was, one of the lenses that you have to look through when you're putting together a deal is understanding why it's a really good deal and the profit potential behind that deal because, I've never had a problem bringing capital to a great deal. Just never have. So I've always focused on finding great deals because the money comes easy with great deals, right? Especially when people have done business with you before. So talk a little bit about financing properties and maybe some of the key things that you look for when you're doing that.
Yeah, when we look at financing properties, and everyone's looking for something different. You got some individuals that have money that want a piece of the deal. You have some individuals that are happy getting points and interest, right? So points are 1%, like 1% of the whatever they're going to loan you, and long-term interest. You have other individuals that want back-end profit. So the reason why I'm going through this because we've raised money all the time, and I have. One individual's got a lot of money, but he wants a 5, 10, 15% kicker in the back end by giving you, 90% of the deal. I got other people that just want 10% interest. So I think the takeaway there is when you continue to raise money, especially at the beginning, you're going to get a laundry list of different types of individuals that want different deals. right? So you're going to get, like I said, someone's going to want points and interest, someone's going to want just interest only, and someone's going to want a portion of that deal. And I know, obviously, it's different. I've invested right now currently in a bunch of syndications as well. So that's just a different setup than, when I'm going to buy my own units here myself. So I know I kind of touched upon a bunch of different things. Not sure if I answered that question, but
okay. So let's talk about that, right? So you said you're in a couple of syndications, and then your comment was, hey, a little bit different when you're investing in your own deals. But I think the premise was, before we get into that conversation, your comment was that, okay, depending on right, you have a basket of investors, and every investor is going to have a different appetite for risk, and that's going to be reflected in their return requirements, right? So capital is going to be priced differently because people have different needs. Okay, and the larger your pool of investors, that helps offset against just one price of money, right, or just one cost of capital. So the larger your investor pool, okay, typically the more options you have around how you place that money. And in some cases, it could be cheaper. In some cases, it could be a little bit more expensive. But the point there being is you have options to be able to match individual investors up, right, or funds up for that matter, to specific investments. Did I kind of summarize that correctly?
You nailed it. Yeah, you nailed it.
Okay, awesome, man. So now let's talk a little bit about what you said about the syndications versus the individual investments. So how do they differ?
Yeah, so the syndication, again, that syndications are different in different types of, arenas, if you will. I have two syndications in Texas. I live in Connecticut. You get a preferential rate of return, and then if they refinance out, you get another kicker to that one. Without getting deep into it, that's just one set of them. And the other set is, 10-unit building here in Connecticut. We bought it as a bank-owned property. Right. So how we analyze that, me and my partner, I put in 50% of the money, he put in 50% of the money, but we know we had a rehab budget as well. So we went to borrow it was more private money at 10% return for the rehab money, because we purchased the property at 10% for rehab. Fixed it all up, ended up selling it, made about $100,000 on that transaction. Pretty good. So that was just a different types of finance. So we used our cash, and then we used private money with 10% behind. So a little different, investments for each investment vehicle, if you will.
Okay, so here's a question, right? This is something like a dilemma that I had to solve when we were investing in, say, one-off properties. Mm-hmm. And that was the issue of scale and efficiency, especially when you're working with individual investors. Right? So how did you solve that challenge? And then I'm going to get into some questions regarding your syndication. But how did you solve that challenge? Or, how have you been able to solve that challenge so that you could scale doing, in this case, for example, for me, it doesn't matter if it's a big property, small property, it doesn't matter. We have systems in place to tackle pretty much any asset at this point, as long as the asset is profitable, right? As long as it makes sense on our time, energy, and, of course, our resources. I'll buy it. I don't care if it's 100 units. I don't care if it's 2, right? I don't even care if it's like a 3-unit property for that matter. Yeah. The key is, hey, does it make sense? And does this fit into our portfolio? How, why? Is it profitable? What's the exit? What are the returns? So for you, it sounds like you have a metrics for that as well. So can you kind of talk us through that?
Yeah, so for us, it has to do with, there's always limited capital, right? And no matter what the investor is or how many investors I have, there's always opportunity to get more money out there, right? Let's call it what it is, because we can only purchase this much. But if you want to purchase this much, you always continue to have to go out to get more capital, right? It sounds to me like you've done a great job of continually to growing your capital base, if you will, your pool of investors, right? So we look at an investment and we say, all right, does this fit within our model? We know we have different types. We have an investor that'll give us 2 points, 12% interest. Another one, 3 points, 10% interest. Another one that wants a 5% equity stake in it, right? Another one that wants to be a 50-50 partner. So we, like me personally owning the company, I have to identify what best person fits within that deal and how much I'm willing to give up. So, and again, those are different buckets that you or me as the investor have to decide, hey, am I going to use this person, or this person's money? And there's another kicker. Some individuals want their money back quicker than the others. So I'm looking through those four lenses because that's what we have right now.
Sure.
For investors. Does that make sense?
It does. Okay, great. I appreciate you sharing that. So here's another, I'm going to give you another perspective, right? Just for our audience. So everything that you said, man, I love. And one of the things that I had to do and that we've done now is when we create our underwriting templates, okay, whether I'm going to use your analogy. So I had to design some underwriting templates that would account for everything that you just said, but would really show me what my cost of capital is. Because for me, I want to involve all my partners in as many deals that I can that make sense, right? It's like, okay, I don't necessarily want to prefer one over the other. It's more about the opportunity and how do I bring this money to the opportunity. So what I figured out was that, sure, everybody has a different risk return profile. But if I could make the deal really profitable and then structure the money in such a way that would hit my target cost, right? My target cost of capital, it really didn't matter. So if this person, for example, was expecting 8, this 10, I can create a blend in our matrix to hit my target cost of capital, and I can bring everybody in the deal and make everybody happy. On the accounting side, yeah, maybe a little bit more work, but then we had to figure that out also. So we figured that out. So once we cut our accounting down, then it became really easy to do that, right? Now on larger deals, much easier because you're dealing with bigger numbers. And so you can just throw a lot more money at these deals to make that kind of stuff work. But to your point, I get it. I understand it. I like the analogy. Hopefully that made a little bit more sense for our audience. So I'm going to pivot, man, and I'm going to get into management. Okay, the art of execution. Sounds like you guys are really good at that. So talk to me a little bit, man, about maybe some of the greatest lessons that you've learned in managing your assets and some of the things that you've put in place to help create consistent execution.
Yeah, so when we look at managing assets, I mean, one of the things that I see that individuals, let's say it's a 10-unit building, 100-unit building, whatever that units are. One of the things, we have a lot of clients using our virtual assistants that manage all of the back end stuff. They take the inbound calls because there's nothing worse, I mean, you probably know this, than if you have a tenant call and or the owner call if you're a management company, because your phone won't stop, especially if it's a 10 to plus unit building. You're getting calls from any tenant out there. This person's too loud. This person's parking in my parking spot. Just complaints, all that kind of stuff that you don't want to take. So on the management side, that's been really, really helpful for using our virtual assistants and clients. Leasing, processing applications, lease renewals, things like that. Collections, accounting. Those are some things on the management side that setting up the systems are extremely important. I know you talk about systems a lot, obviously in your podcast, which are 100% dead spot on. If you don't have systems and processes, no matter what it is, anyone's going to struggle. So that's something that put into place that way.
Okay, so here's some of my experiences early on with virtual assistants, man, was this, right? One of the things that I had to get really clear on was that there's really a lot of talented people out there. And initially, it really wasn't about the virtual assistant. I was just a really poor manager, right, to be frank. Okay, I mean, you have to think about the fact that most people don't realize this, but one of the advantages of working with people overseas is they're forced to get good with technology. And in many cases, they were much better at me than using technology. And that was the reality when we first started back in 2008, right? They were just much more proficient, frankly, smarter. And the issue that I was having was I just wasn't a very good leader, and I wasn't very good at leading people and managing people. And so consequently, what ended up happening was even though I had really good talent, okay, I wasn't good enough at that time. And I didn't understand to make sure that I got really clear on what their roles were and putting process and procedures in place so that they could do their job better, right? It took me about 3 years, man, before as I figured that out. And then we as a company, we started figuring that out. And now very different. Now we understand this, and we I think we do a really good job of doing that. So talk a little bit about that. What are your experiences? It's usually either the person or process, but in many cases, it's not having good process in place. So can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, and that's not uncommon, right? It's the same thing happened to me. Same thing that, I talk to clients all day long that, the thing is, we could run a business. Running a business or doing a certain role is different than managing. Right? It's just totally different. There's no class in college that I took on how to actually manage somebody. When you get there, if you're coaching kids sports, right? Now you have to learn how to coach them, manage them, and also manage parents' expectations, all that kind of stuff. Same thing in business, right? A lot of us never got taught that, so you have to go through that. It took you 3 years to learn it. Part of the game, right? One thing that I've learned is documenting every single thing that you have in your business, step by step. So if it's acquisition, you got to create a process document to document all those steps. If it's property management, it's the same thing. There's a process document for mainline, taking calls from owners, taking calls from tenants, leasing. There's another process document. Another process document for lease renewals, for accounting. So the takeaway there is, and I learned this back in 2004 from my first mentor, Pat Precourt. He said that no matter what you do, every single thing you do, you have to document everything so you can pull yourself out of that position, plug someone else in there, and it'll accomplish two things. Number one, it helps you grow and take yourself out of that position, but it also allows you to create, in essence, a training platform. So it's going to cut your training time in half. So if you have a process document for that one, let's say system or process, you can pull yourself out, plug someone else in. In essence, that's the training for it. So I learned that back in 2004. I was fortunate enough to have someone teach me that.
Okay, cool. So maybe what's one or two tips you can share with our audience so that they can start documenting that process, right? Because it's one thing to say, hey, you need to document your process. Like when someone first told that to me, I remember thinking to myself, okay, well, what the heck does that mean? Okay. And I'm just being very candid, right? I'm like, okay, well, I get the fact that you have to document this stuff, but where do you start? And then once you start building this stuff out, usually it's not in the sequence that you need it to be to actually make it worthwhile, make it even a process, right? It's more like, okay, let's start documenting what it is that you do for this specific task. And then at some point you have to take all that information and you have to organize it in such a way that it's actually a process. There's some sequence to it, so that you can free up your time, right? And actually it will help create efficiency. So can you maybe share one or two things with the audience that will help them, help them start creating process?
Yep. First, I would start with, it starts with the main topic, right? And then I break everything down in kind of like a table of contents, just like every book. So let's use lead generation. I'll just use that as an example, right? Okay. So if you have lead generation, there's going to be different ways that you're going to drive leads, right? Are you going to cold call? Are you going to text message? Are you going to direct mail? Are you going to do social media marketing, right? So those are 4 different types of processes that you could set up. Cold calling, very simple. What's my dialer I'm going to use? What's my script am I going to use, right? Where am I going to get my lists? Who's going to skip trace them for my phone numbers? So it's really breaking down all of the steps that actually go under what cold calling is, as an example, right? Sure. Direct mail. What direct mail company I'm going to use? Where am I going to get that particular motivated seller list, right? Who's going to implement it? What mailing house am I going to use? Who's going to take those calls? So it's really identifying those processes and documents through all of that. So now you could take that off of your plate. Boom. You could hire someone that handles the lead generation marketing. So that's just I know it's a quick example.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. I think that's a great way to maybe explain that a little bit differently so that our audience, a little bit more tangible, right? So last week I was on a very interesting call with the CEO of Z Inspector. And we love that product. We work with it a lot. And, fortunately, we have some pretty direct conversations with them that have worked to improve our process and our systems. And one of I think, man, these guys, they do a great job because they just listen to their customers, right? If I approach them and I say, hey, this is something that we're trying to do. Are you open to considering this? They'll just be like, yeah, let's do it. Let's figure it out. It's just amazing, right? I mean, that's why these companies these folks have grown so rapidly. And I think now they serve like over 1 million units. Just fantastic, right? Incredible. And this guy's an engineer, so it's really good speaking with him because of the way his brain works. But one of the big takeaways there, and through another experience that I had maybe a couple years prior, was, okay, there's a big difference between process and systems, okay? And, for us, one of the big leaps is when we figured out that once we actually had process that was documented, now we need to take that to the next level and start systematizing it so that we could technically remove ourselves from that, right? And then that's where the VAs came in and employees came in, where we can plug them into systems based on certain triggers. So can you talk a little bit about that? So now you have this process in place. Like, what kind of systems do you guys use to automate your processes?
So do you mean my technology tools at all, or are you talking about?
Right.
Okay.
Share some nuggets, some gold for the audience.
Some gold. Yeah. So I'll give you some of the tools that we use, some of the systems that we use. So for cold calling, there's a bunch of different ones out there. We use Five9. There's a Mojo Cells that we use. We have a Podio system that we created, and we plugged in a dialer called Smartphone. That's SMRT and then phone, a good way to do outbound dialing. And the good thing that works with that is everything is recorded. So if you're going to replace yourself, you could plug someone else in with all those recorded calls that will train that individual that you want to take out. Text message platform, text messaging works really well now. Even in apartment complexes or units to find buyers or to find sellers, and we use a company called Launch Control. Very good. Works very, very good. The deliverability is the highest that I've seen. So those are 3 or 4 little tools that I just gave.
And is Launch Control, is that like an app that you can integrate with another system, or is that its own product? So
it's its own product, but it does integrate with Podio. So all those leads that come in. So
got it.
Yeah, so we have all of our virtual assistants go through it, and every time we get a hot lead, it populates into our Podio.
Gotcha. Okay, Launch Control. Interesting, man. I really appreciate that. Those are some really good tips. Okay, Bob, so we're going to start now winding down with the last section, which is disposition, selling off a profitable asset and profiting cash, right? So talk a little bit about that, right? So now we've gone from acquisitions to capitalizing the asset. We talked about financing. We mostly talked about debt financing using private money. Then we transitioned a little bit into management. You were kind enough, man, to share, some processes or the way to approach process rather. And then, you concluded that with providing some really good tips on some of the things that you guys use or tools that you use rather to systematize various processes. So now we're going to get into a conversation around selling off the asset, ideally profitably. So can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't matter what industry you're in. I mean, if you acquire stuff and your plan is to get out of it, it all has to do with who your buyer's pool is, right? And one of the things that I do want to say is you got to look at how quick they can purchase. You got to look at who's their financing backer too. Because I'm sure you've seen this, get into a deal, someone gives you a verbal commitment, or you get them under contract to sell it, and then they have a weasel clause and their financing blows up, right? It's very, very important for us.
What did you call it, a weasel clause?
Yeah, a weasel clause to get out of the deal, just in case financing happens.
A weasel clause, I like that, man.
So it's our job, again, as if we're holding those properties and we're looking to sell, we have to do our due diligence on who is the financing for that end buyer as well, right? Because for us to lock up a contract, and we're going to lose so much time if we go through that process and they really don't have legit financing. So disposition, I mean, you nailed it. Disposition is huge. You got to find out who your buyers are and can they perform.
Okay, so I'm gonna take what you said because I think it's really, really important, and maybe expand upon that a little bit differently to give our audience to give them more context. Okay.
Yep.
So let's say, for example, you're buying, in this case in San Diego, so down in Chula Vista, very big military base. Mm-hmm. So you're likely going to have more buyers down there that are going to qualify for VA financing, right?
Correct.
Okay. Say it's 70% of that market, and VA financing, you and I know, 100% financing, technically maybe a little bit more than that, okay? So if you're pricing your asset, you say you're underwriting a property, you figure your exit value is $500,000.
Yeah.
You know that in that market, you're going to have a wider buyer base because the majority of them can qualify up to 100% financing. So you don't have to put hardly any money down. Mm-hmm. Okay. So the value of that exit price is probably fairly stable because you have a larger buyer pool with less barriers to entry, right? You don't have to have any money down to purchase that property. So as long as your comps support that $500,000, you're fairly likely going to get that exit price because you have very little barriers and there's a lot more demand for that product because there are little barriers around financing, right? Okay, now say it was a market where you had no VA buyers. Mm-hmm. In this case, 80% conventional buyers where they had to come in with 25% down.
Yep.
Okay. And so now you're trying to get the same exit. However, right, we entered a market where interest rates rose by 100 basis points from 4 to 5% and reduced everybody's ability to buy or their propensity to buy by, say, $1,000 or $2,000 a month. You may have some issues there selling that property, right? Because now there's just, not that there's less demand, you just are going to have, it's less affordable and you're going to have less people that can buy the property. So to your point, understanding what your buyer pool looks like and really understanding their financing that they're going to qualify for that can influence your price, really, really important, man. So I really appreciate bringing that up. What are some other things you can add to that? Because that's pretty important. I like that.
So the market, I mean, you nailed it. The market condition is really important, right? So you look at different markets are different. You go San Diego, you go, to different areas. If there is a big military area there, you'll know, right? Right away, those are VA buyers, right? If you're going somewhere where there's no military base, you're going to, I don't know, let's say it's Kansas City, right? Right. It's our job to look at who our buyers are. Is there a new Amazon building going in, right? We have one going in right here in Danbury, Connecticut. So now you know what you're going to be doing is you're going to be marketing towards typically those individuals, right? If it's a 20-unit building, you want to sell it all at once, I'm going to the New York buyers because they're getting out of New York and buying stuff in Connecticut. Right. So these are some of the things that we go through in our own office right now whenever we're looking to do disposition on different types of units, whether they're multi-units or whatever. We start thinking exactly who's buying these, right, in what area. In New Haven, Connecticut, there's 2 big buyers in New Haven, Connecticut. So we know right away before we get a property that we're going to purchase, we want to see if they want to buy it, where we could assign the contract. That's one of our exit strategies on some of the real estate that we do. So I think it's important knowing, obviously, our conversation was if you own an asset, though, and we're looking at selling it, it's different than, if I'm going to buy it, rehab it, and resell it. We're talking about the same thing, though. If you're going to resell it, who is your buyer? So that's kind of the concept we're talking about.
Awesome, man. I really appreciate you sharing that. Well, Bob, we're at the end of our show. You've been a great guest. This has been an amazing conversation. And I'm sure, I have here about a page worth of notes, so I'm sure our audience has been able to walk away with quite a bit as well. So, Bob, one of the questions that I always ask before we get off the show, and of course you share your information with our audience, is what is the one question that you have of me that you feel can add value to our listeners? So what would that be, bud?
What's your definition of success?
Well,
that's a tough one. I know.
No, that's actually a really good one. Man, for me, probably not like the canned answer, right? But for me, my definition of success really is to be able to wake up and do what you absolutely love. It's not a monetary thing. It's more of I think it's about living your purpose, right? So if I'm doing what I love and I'm growing, let me back up. Let me start by saying this. So for me, one of the reasons why we created this podcast is it's consistent with our purpose of building out great communities and improving how people live. Okay, that's our purpose. That's what we share with our staff. Okay, that's what we want to replicate with our residents. So this podcast became an extension of our purpose, or what some people call a mission. Okay, for me, I had to change that because it became more tangible for our employees. And so we communicate that through our staff pretty much every day, and they can in turn show up like that or show up that way with our residents, right? So this podcast really became an extension of that. Now, on a personal level, my purpose is to grow and to contribute to other people, right? Really simple. That's it. Growth and contribution. Okay. So I really feel that when you can wake up each day and you can pursue what you truly are passionate about or what your purpose is, the natural byproduct is going to be greater income, right? The natural byproduct is going to be more financial stability, more financial income. But the success for me comes in being able to communicate or to live out those things. Does that make sense?
It does. It does. Very good. And everyone has a different answer. That's why I love that question.
Yeah. So that's what success looks like to me. And of course, man, my family is a big deal for me. So that's a really big driver of mine. And to make sure that, I can be the example for my kids to be, right? I mean, I want to be the example for them. I don't need anyone else doing that. That's my job. And to make sure that I live my life in a way, man, that can set an example for them. So, there was an event that I did a while ago. I think it was called a 10X event. I think it was called 10X. So Mark Devine, Navy SEAL commander, they put on these events, right, where they bring in these civilians. And actually in this one, they had half of maybe 80% of the people there were military or folks looking to go into BUDS or do special ops stuff. So me and a couple buddies, man, we train for this thing and we go out there and basically they try to beat you down and make you quit for, I think it's like a 12-hour event, right?
Yeah.
And so one of the things that they asked was, he said, okay, hey, look, why's your why? And his comment was, if you don't have a strong enough why, you're likely going to not make it through this event. Now, I trained for that event really hard. In fact, I did a triathlon just to make sure that I was really prepared. And that triathlon ended like 2 weeks before that event started, so that I was really ready when we started this thing, right? I mean, I was really ready for this. So one of the things that they would go around and ask is, hey, what's your why? And it had to be really strong. Interestingly enough, I mean, I couldn't hear everybody's, but what's really interesting, man, is a lot of the guys that were super fit, you look at these guys, you're like, man, this guy's like 25 years old, extraordinarily fit, CrossFitter, okay? A lot of these guys didn't make it, man. They couldn't finish the event. They dropped out, right?
Yeah.
And, when he came to me, my why was to be the only example of a man that my wife and kids will ever need, ever, period. Nothing else after that. So the likelihood of me not finding a way to finish through that event, highly unlikely, right? And that's something, man, that I can always fall back on. But anyways, to your point, success, you're right, is defined differently by a lot of different people. But I really feel when you can live out your passion and you really are clear on what your why is and it's strong enough, you'll just simply find a way to the finish line. You'll find a way.
Yeah. That's perfect. Love it.
Awesome, man. Well, Bob, you have been a tremendous, tremendous guest. I'm so grateful for your time and the insights. Man, how do people get in touch with you if they want to learn a little bit more about you? And I think the other side of that too is maybe reach out to you and learn more about how you can help them improve or grow their business with VAs. What would be the best way to reach out and touch you, man?
Yeah, just you could check out our website at revaglobal.com. That's REVAglobal.com. My email is bob@revaglobal.com. We also have a podcast called the Friday Coffee Break Unfiltered.
I like it.
Friday mornings at 10 a.m. EST.
Put that up again. Let me see that. That looked really good. I like that.
It's good.
Friday mornings, Friday Coffee Break Unfiltered.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. It's a funny open Q&A. It goes off rails. So it's actually pretty funny. It's myself, Pat Precourt, my old business partner, and Amy Ransdale, who's worked with for a long, long time. So get a lot of different perspectives.
Beautiful, man. Well, man, I'm really grateful that you're on. Thank you for sharing your insights. It's been a great conversation, and I want to wish you continued success and that you continue to crush it, man. Keep living big.
Awesome. Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Anytime.
Thanks a lot.
Clarity of purpose creates our greatest competitive advantage. When we transform apartment buildings to thriving communities, we improve how people live and create assets with high profit margins. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and share this up with a friend. I'm John Brackett, bringing you things you can implement right away.